Hello and welcome to episode 41 of Lost in Chronologically Lost, where this time we're covering what I know are sure to be Matthew's favorite episodes because they're the Christmas episodes.
Oh yeah, I guess they are. I thought it was the almost Christmas episodes.
Well, it's almost Christmas and Christmas.
Okay.
So we got Christmas Eve and
I
Christmas
didn't even
in here.
really think about that. I did think about the line because when Saeed commented on it being almost Christmas, I was like, I thought you were a Muslim.
Doesn't mean he doesn't know when Christmas is.
Sure, I know when Christmas is, but I still think, I don't know, it was a little odd. Is that something you feel the need to comment on if you're not someone who celebrates Christmas? Because I know, everybody loves that. Alright, I'll get controversial here, but society loves the hell out of Christmas. So if it's somebody who celebrates Christmas, you know they're going to be, super, they're going to be sad because they didn't celebrate a proper Christmas. That's the kind of person I'd expect to, comment on it.
Well, it's not like everyone else got gifts and they didn't, so they have nothing to complain about.
Well, anyway, where do we begin?
So Locke wakes up and starts making breakfast for Ben, who he's keeping prisoner in his basement. And he's like, hey, tell me about the spy. And Locke's in.
That's the same room that Anthony was in at some point, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And he's like, hey, who's your spy on the boat? And Ben's like, still just, I won't tell you.
Yeah.
For basically no reason at this point.
Yeah, he's just messing with him. He's just a shitter. But, Ben calls out, I'm locked in a different room and you're even more lost. And he's like, you have no idea what you're doing. And Locke delivers the line, I know what you're trying to do. It's not going to work. And that is a thing people only say when it is working.
Especially, it's like it's working because as he leaves, Ben will comment to him and he will stop closing the door and start to listen, which is like, no, that means it is working.
And then he throws a plate at the wall. You're really keeping Ben from realizing.
You want to angrily throw the plate at the wall. Okay, do it far away enough where Ben can't hear you.
Well, I guess kind of is the point that Locke doesn't have a plan. If he even had a plan, then that plan could involve, not letting Ben realize that he doesn't have a plan. But because he doesn't have a plan, he doesn't even think about, I can't let Ben realize.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so Kate is just, sitting there with Claire, and for a while I'm kind of thinking, Kate is just kind of with this faction now. I thought she would stick with Jack's faction, but then the way it goes does make sense.
Yeah, so then Sawyer shows up and he's basically like, hey, Kate, just stay here with me.
And she's like, fuck off, Sawyer.
Yeah, so then we see Jin and Sun planning where to live in America, but
she wants to raise her baby in Korea, and is that an option for them? Remember their entire backstory?
I have to wonder if being presumed dead for 3 months and then coming back not only alive but pregnant would perhaps warm her father's heart just a tad.
Yeah,
maybe.
Look, I don't know where Sun is in season 5, but if she's back in the normal world, I'm sure that, or if she spent, the time skip back in the normal world, I'm sure that her dad liked that. The whole baby thing.
Yeah. So everyone on the beach gets introduced to Daniel and Charlotte.
And I could have used more interactions, meetings, and stuff, but we have a fast-moving plot now, so we don't have time for that.
Yeah, it's the writer's strike. Yeah, we don't have time for this.
So then, Kate wants to talk to Miles, and Locke is like, no, this isn't a democracy. It's almost like siding with Locke is kind of a whack thing to do. It's like, wow, the guy who always never told anybody what the hell he was up to, now he wouldn't let you talk to Miles? What a leader.
What, and you're telling me it's not as easy to schmooze what you want from the leader when the leader's not in love with you?
That too. I don't know. I mean, looking at Locke, a lot of how he behaves here, I don't think Locke even is like the leaderly type. Like, he's technically in the position of a leader, but Jack knows how to lead. Jack knows how to, like, make decisions, and, like, I mean, he messes it up. He's not good at it necessarily, or at least he's not perfect. But he's a leader of men, whereas Locke just feels more like he's in charge.
Yeah. So then Kate just super easily tricks Hurley into revealing where Miles is.
He's like,
just not
he's like,
1 second.
Just don't tell Locke it was me.
So she gets to Miles, and basically she just wants to know if the boat people know everything about
Yeah, and
her
it's
past.
honestly, she probably should have just assumed they do, but I get why, she wanted to do it this way.
Yeah. And he says, hey, get me a meeting with Ben, and then I'll tell you what you want to know.
Yep. And meanwhile, we just get a bit of Jack, trying to call the boat, and Jack, he mentions Locke is a fool for thinking that the boat people are here to hurt us, and it sounds like, well, why is Kate with them? And we know why Kate is with them, and it's not because Locke is trustworthy.
Nope.
So anyway,
and then we have Kate refusing to hold Aaron still, which I'm like, girl, you caught him when he was bored. I think you can hold him.
And meanwhile,
so she tries to get Sawyer's help.
Well,
to
before that,
bust out Ben.
Hurley is asking what Sawyer wants to watch, but Sawyer, the intellectual, is busy reading. And then Sawyer comes and Kate comes. They drink wine, small talk, and he's like, "You're here to manipulate me," and she's like, "Yeah, I am. Do what the fuck I say." And honestly, I thought that busting Ben out makes no sense, because then you deal with the risk of let me say that again. So busting Ben out makes no sense, because then you deal with the risk that he could escape. What you should do is bring Miles to Ben. But of course, that wasn't her real plan. Or I mean, that
her real plan was bring Miles.
Like,
to
I frankly, during this plotline, I underestimated her, because Sawyer shows up to play backgammon, and they have a little conversation. I think if people believe in Locke, which Locke isn't a leader. He doesn't make people believe in him.
Mm-hmm.
But then,
so eventually, Kate's plan works, and she gets Miles the minute with Ben. Which it turns out his plan was to just blackmail Ben for and he asked for $3.2 million, to which Ben's like, that's such an why not 3.3 or 3.4?
And you can see Miles thinking about it.
Yeah, but it was 3.2 because he's currently being paid 1.6, so it's basically just like, give me double.
Yeah. I mean, didn't he ask for he asked for double from those other guys before now, right? Who are probably others.
Yes.
So and he even kind of says he's willing to take care of Charlotte because Charlotte has seen Ben, which it's a little sus, Miles, but I still love you. And
and then he says, "Okay, you have 2 days to do this," and Ben's like, really? Can I have a little more time? I think I'm freaking tied up in a basement right now.
Even somebody not tied up in a basement might take a little time. Anyway,
and then it turns out that they know everything about Kate.
So I gotta wonder how things are gonna go for her when they get back. And now I do have to say, there's no good reason for Kate to have had to do this secretly, but there are believable reasons. Because, you're putting Miles back in custody. If you could just tell Locke, hey, I need to know if they know that I was a criminal. And you could even just say to Locke, okay, I want to stay on the island, but just in case I want to know if they know I'm a criminal. I mean, they're attacking us. What if one of them tries to capture me? Tell Locke that, and get Locke, at least try to get Locke to agree to just have them meet. Locke can supervise it. It's a 1-minute meeting. And frankly, that meeting would benefit Locke because Miles would be about to agree to tell his bosses that Ben isn't there, which could even, help his bosses not attack the island. So basically, you could just talk to Locke and make this whole thing happen, but I get why you wouldn't, because I think Locke would have said no anyway, because that's how Locke is lately.
Yes, especially because then after finding all this out, he just banishes her.
Which, I do get that, because that's more about her doing things behind his back and taking the risk.
Yeah. So then, she goes to Sawyer's room, and he tries to get her to stay. And they don't sleep together. I originally wrote, oh, they sleep together, and then the next scene after, I'm like, oh, let me go add in, no, they don't sleep together, because...
Yeah. I'm not sure I got why. I thought they did. What did I miss?
Well, the scene after, he says, oh, I get with the pregnancy scare why you didn't want to go all the way, but blah, blah, blah. So he says something like that. Anyway, then we get Charlotte testing Daniel's memory, which is getting better, but he's still mad because he can't remember 3 cards.
Still not great.
Yeah.
So then,
So Jack and Juliet, they get the emergency number for the boat, and turns out the chopper didn't arrive.
And this just seems like it's weird whack time shit, and there's delays when you travel back and forth and stuff sometimes, but doesn't...
Yeah, to be fair, when I said that the time thing wouldn't matter, I meant that the time thing wouldn't matter outside of season 4.
Yeah.
They're not gonna deal with it.
It matters in terms of this affects, the plot of going back and forth between the boat and the island, but it isn't, some deep thing that will be hyper important at the finale of the series.
Yeah. So then Locke goes and sticks a grenade in Miles' mouth to stop him from talking.
Yeah. So if you wanted me to turn against Locke, this is how. Because what the fuck, Locke? This is cruel and unusual. I don't mean that as an exaggeration. This is cruel, and it is also very unusual.
Yeah.
He's not a leader, and this is just it's you shouldn't have done that. There's no good reason to do that.
So then Kate wakes up with Sawyer, and whatever, they talk about the whole thing where she might be pregnant, but she knows for certain that she isn't, so...
I guess we know how that would be the case. And...
Yeah, but then she's also mad that Sawyer is happy about that, which is
You know what? And he kind of calls her out for the fact that, oh, you'll be back with me in a week. And she's really mad at that, but he kind of is right.
To be fair, that's the part where I'm like, you know what? Yeah, he's is he wrong though?
I mean, he's being a what's the saying? He's out of line, but he's right.
Yeah. And I love that scene just because it's season 4 and this is the audience have been yelling this forever. It's finally someone says it.
I mean, I'm just feeling the fact that I know that Sawyer will settle down with Juliet eventually, and it's kind of funny seeing some other stuff in these episodes with that in mind.
Yeah. So then we have the chopper starts flying to the freighter, and Desmond's like, I'm going to get answers on the freighter.
Oh, yeah, that's what he's going to get.
Kind of true.
So then...
But then he starts freaking out, wondering where the hell he is and who everyone is.
Apparently flying back and forth from the island does this, and I was just like, oh, hell yeah, finally this plot is happening. More of my timeline can be filled out.
Yeah, so... I mean, to be fair, they do say, has he been exposed to, a large amount of radiation or electromagnetism, which is
Yes.
Well, he basically sat inside a large electromagnet for 3 years and then had it explode on him, so...
Yeah, that's I don't know if this is canon, but I feel like he probably had this more extremely than everyone else because it was several years apart.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
So then Daniel's like, oh, well, time's weird on the island, blah, blah, blah. You have to stay on the correct bearing or you won't. Just whatever.
And so Saeed tries to
So
keep...
the chopper gets to the freighter, and they don't mention the name of the freighter yet. I don't know if they actually ever will.
It was on the... I saw it on the side. I think it was the Kahana.
Yeah, I was going to say, but you can see it written on the side.
Oh.
It's Kahana, which it's Hawaiian. It obviously, with Hawaiian, every word has multiple meanings. But one of the meanings is turning point.
You said obviously, and I didn't know that.
Well, I believe their syllabary is quite small.
Yeah,
so,
that does make sense. Anyway,
it can mean turning point, which is interesting.
So throughout this next section, this whole plotline, the editing keeps having these cuts that do clearly tell me that, like, oh, there was a past segment in between that, where, I mean, it's kind of jarring, but it does tell me when he goes back and forth.
Yeah, if I would say if there was one episode that you should watch normally, it would be this one.
I honestly might just rewatch it after we record. I do kind of, like, they do kind of call in advance what goes where, because when they say, like, oh, you need to go meet me, I'm like, okay, the next cut is going to be him going to meet Daniel. And they say, oh, you need to, ground, like, you need to, it's like when they say you need, like, do you know Penny's number? I know that he's going to go get Penny's number in the next one. So I did put it together.
Yeah. So they're like, hey, let's try and figure out what's wrong with Desmond. Take him to the sick bay.
And
they find Minkowski has been restrained because the same thing's happening to him.
And I do think it's kind of the way that, so there's like mercenaries on this ship, right? And it's kind of odd how they're portrayed, because at first, like, why the hell did you bring them there? And I'm like, oh no, are they going to be really mad? But then they kind of chill out and they're like, oh shit, Desmond is having those same symptoms, let's help him. And then he ends up acting, like, very nice to Desmond. I mean, not, like, truly nice, but he's like, oh, this, I kind of expected the mercenaries to be more asshole-ish than they are.
I'd hold your breath on
that.
No,
I mean, I'm not saying I expected them to be totally asshole-ish. I'm sure that we're going to end up killing them at some point because they're going to be very dangerous. But I was worried that, like, the whole time on this boat would be very uncomfortable with them, like, not wanting Saeed and Desmond there, and it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, so I will say that the sort of head mercenary, I don't believe his name has been said yet, but it's Kimi.
I think they do say it at some point.
Yeah, so Saeed sees Kimi arguing with Lapidus over something. It's too far away for us to tell.
Yeah. And then
he ends up trading his gun for Frank's phone.
And he calls Jack and explains what is happening.
And Daniel's like, oh, okay, I know this one.
Yep.
Let's fix this.
And it is not amnesia, it's something else. So then, George says he was on a Ferris wheel, which sounds really fun compared to this. And then when the doctor comes in, he's like, see, it's not just happening to me. But he just gets drugged.
Yeah. And so Daniel is like, hey, you have to come visit me in 1996, and here's all the information you have to give me. So, and Desmond starts writing it on his palm, which
does nothing.
One of the flashes has him waking up staring at his palm, and there's nothing there, and he's like, fuck.
Yeah, I remember that. But so obviously, him going to talk to Daniel happened in between, and then.
And then we get Minkowski saying that Penny kept repeatedly calling the boat. Which makes sense now that she was expecting a call from Desmond, and she's trying to preemptively reach him instead.
Yeah, I mean, that is where the signal is in the area of. So then, I liked the point where Desmond just tells Saeed, if we're friends, you gotta help me, and Saeed's like, yep, I'm helping you. So they get to the equipment that was sabotaged, which, Well,
before that, they find that the locked door has suddenly been unlocked and left unopened.
Yeah, and I'm like, I know who that had to be.
Yeah, looks like... the line specifically is, looks like you guys have a friend on this boat.
Yep. A friend. And then...
so we get another Desmond blipping, and then Minkowski blips and dies.
Yeah, that is fucked up, because he was a good dude. He was really nice.
Yeah, and then Desmond blips again and comes back, and he's like, hey, I got Penny's number, let's call her. And it's a nice scene. I love this scene. Everyone loves this scene.
Like, Desmond is like Charlie. I didn't dislike him as much as Charlie, but I was pretty mixed on him for a while. But he ended up being pretty great.
Yeah,
And,
so it's great. They
know,
finally
they
say "I love you"
other.
to each other.
Oh yeah, they say it multiple times, and at the end, and so I think that once this conversation starts, he kind of becomes like united into present Desmond, right?
Yes.
So like, just because I was thinking like, if this is past Desmond talking, then it kind of sucks because then present Desmond doesn't get to reunite with her. But then I figured like, okay, as the conversation starts, he becomes present Desmond.
Yep. And then we see in Daniel's journal that his constant is Desmond.
Yeah. So is that gonna happen to him? I don't.
I think it's already happened. I think that's part of the it's part island and part that he has interacted with his constant now from 96 to 2004.
Oh, so wait,
and also 2001 technically.
Wait, so okay, so it's not like the same issue, but part of the reason his head was so messed up is like from his experiment, his head kind of got messed up, but then talking to Desmond then in that meeting and now in the present has also fixed him.
Yeah, it appears that his experiments were like artificially doing what the island does naturally.
But then it was kind of, it wasn't like the exact same, but it was like because it obviously
similar enough.
It didn't unstick him in time in the same way, but it was like affecting his mind, and now it's resolved.
Yeah.
Well, that is nice to see.
A fun fact. Originally, this was not the original stinger at the end of an episode. There was actually supposed to be an additional scene they had to cut for time, which was of Daniel and Charlotte dramatically getting dressed in all the hazmat gear to shock everyone to be like, wait, why do they need that? Like,
yeah, but instead we get the reveal later that they're doing something like that.
Yeah, instead the episode begins and they're just gone. And Jin's like, well, you said they were friends, so I didn't bother to mention it.
Jin trusts his friends, and that's beautiful in its own way.
Yeah.
And
so while searching for them, Juliet sees her terrible therapist.
Yeah, which kind of it's all tied together here because I think it's kind of obvious which flashback this was.
Yeah, it's all the Juliet and Goodwin and creepy Ben stuff.
And also, while she meets with the therapist, like the whispers are going crazy. Which, what even are those, man?
I think they were supposed to be. What it seemed like they were leading to is that the whispers are the others. But let me tell you, they're not the others. So
anyway, the therapist says they're going to deploy the gas, and that's just a lie. And it's almost like, what do they gain from that lie then? Because I guess they want Daniel and Charlotte to just get killed by Juliet. Because
yes, and they want the gas to remain there in case they want to use it.
Yeah, I guess so. And also, she mentions Ben is exactly where he wants to be, and I think that's
Juliet's like, how the hell is Ben first one knowing this information and two getting information out?
So
which the Lost Wiki says is still an unanswered question.
I almost think he probably gave general. No, he didn't have time to give orders to people before he left, and they did say.
No, he did
and
not.
They did say the others could just storm Locke's base if they really wanted to, which I think they definitely could. But could they get into the locked room Ben was stuck in to communicate? It doesn't add up.
That room is literally connected to Sawyer or to Locke's house. It's not some separate compound. I could see them sneaking into.
I could see them sneaking into Locke's house. I couldn't see them getting through the lock. The lock on the door,
okay.
not the man.
Oh, I could see that. I could see that very easily. Them getting through the lock. It's the others.
Well, no, I mean they could open the lock, but then it would be broken, and Locke would know.
Well, they could pick it and then pick it back closed.
I guess. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so Juliet continues the lie that the Tempest is an electrical station, which is the same lie that Goodwin told her when they first met.
I think there's a lot of There are a lot of unnecessary lies in this episode, I think. And I think one of the biggest ones is that I think Daniel and Charlotte could have just, like, told Jack they wanted to do this. Because if you told Jack, hey, we want to go disable some chemicals so they don't get used against us because, Ben, the guy you hate, could use them, Jack would be like, hell fucking yes.
Here's the thing, though. I'm pretty sure Charlotte was more in charge right now.
Yeah.
And Charlotte doesn't trust them. Like,
okay, she's wrong.
She's wrong, but that's her.
I guess.
In her mind, these people can't be trusted. We have to do this by ourselves.
Anyway, meanwhile,
so
Kate just
ends up just stumbling onto Daniel and Charlotte on her way back.
And, she tells them Miles is fine. Charlotte lies about what they're doing. Kate notices the lie, sees their gas masks, and Charlotte knocks her out.
Yeah. So...
And we get a bit of Jack, and Juliet talking, and Juliet's like, I'm sure there's things in your past you wanted to leave behind. And Jack's like, yeah, you read all about them.
Yeah, and he's like, that was my therapist. It's like, you guys have a therapist? It's very stressful being another Jack. Like, that's one of my, like, easily my top 5 lines of the whole show. Like...
Anyway,
So then Claire wants to try and talk to Miles, which is interesting. And she starts, like, very lightly questioning Locke's leadership.
And she's like, I'm less intimidating. Frankly, Miles is not the kind of guy who's gonna respond to an emotional appeal. But I think if you took your baby to him... I know, you could say it's wrong to use your baby in this way. But I think just to make sure, like... just to see if an emotional appeal would work, you take your baby and you say, I want to be able to protect my baby. Are you going to let us get home or not?
Yeah, and then Locke's like, hey, remember what Charlie said? And she's like, hey, Charlie never said whose boat it was. Yeah. Like, we should probably figure that out.
It's almost like Locke is just being controlling.
Yeah, and then, so, Ben starts egging Locke on about... is the revolution started yet?
Don't forget. Locke shows up with some rabbit, and Ben asks if it had a number on it.
Right, I forgot about that.
That was good. And, yeah, he's like, yeah, the revolution's gonna happen. And, he talks about, Ben, how are you gonna raise money? And Ben is gonna show him his safe. And then, meanwhile, Jack and Juliet find Kate. They all catch each other up, and then Juliet immediately dips. And it's like, there's no one decent to work with on this island. Everyone is always dipping and betraying you and fucking off without telling you what they're doing. No one you can rely on here.
So then Ben reveals the secret compartment he has in his house with a VHS tape that still says Red Sox.
It's I'm sure what he had shown Jack back in the tank.
Yeah, he's like, we taped over the game.
And that is Widmore, so I think you've told me, like, the show for a while tried to build him up as the big bad, but then the actor wasn't available. But this is where it's trying to build him up as the big bad.
Well, not that the actor wasn't available, it's just that when you answer the question of who is Widmore, and the answer is he was a former leader of the others, how does that answer then lead into answering questions like, what is the smoke monster? Why can we see dead people? What is the history of... Like, it doesn't really lead to anything. It leads to a dead end of he was a former leader of the others.
So they just moved away from that direction of the plot.
Yeah, they had to move somewhere else so that they could actually answer questions in like a plot-conducive manner, and not one where you just have Widmore going, oh, the smoke monster is this, and the history is this. Like,
but either way, right now is when they're trying to build him up. And Ben basically just pretends to not know how Widmore knows about the island, and that just is like... I find that annoying. Fuck you, Ben.
Yeah, and, he says that, like, Widmore wants to basically... maybe he says this later, but he says, a whole thing of, 5,000 people would flock to piece of moss that looks like the Virgin Mary. How many would come to this island when they knew of its miracles? And it's like, but Widmore wouldn't do that either. Like
I thought he was implying Widmore would do that, and I thought this was supposed to be a reveal.
Well, he's implying Widmore would do that, but
this was supposed
based on what you know,
would he do that? I thought this was supposed to be a reveal that Widmore's ultimate plan was, land development, tourism.
I mean,
which, I don't think he needs that to make money.
No, he doesn't. And Widmore was the guy who ordered all of Dharma to be killed because he didn't want other people on the island.
Well, I thought that maybe being kicked out changed his mind, and he was like, "Fuck you, I want my island back."
Well, he does want his island back. I just don't think he wants to turn it into a tourist destination.
Okay, yes, that does make sense. Okay, so then I still don't know what his real plan is. Or is his real plan? Well, I mean, is his real plan just to kill Ben, come back, and replace him?
It feels like that's what it is.
Okay.
Again, he's not on the boat, so we're not really gonna meet him.
I mean, is it just like whenever this whole boat thing gets resolved, or is the plot just gonna kind of forget about him?
No, he'll be around.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the actor, again, it's not that they had actor issues. He's still there. He's just.
I feel like there've been enough actor issues that I kind of just assumed.
Yeah, I think we're past actor issues
I think
at this point.
Lost kind of knows what it's doing at this point, so
And it has an end date, so every actor they sign on, they can be like, "Hey, we're gonna go for 6 seasons. You have to be ready for that."
Okay. Anyway, he gives Locke a file that is everything he knows about Widmore, and again, that is literally not everything you know about Widmore.
Yeah, and then off screen he tells Locke who the spy on the boat is.
And I already know, so it's not a big deal. But I do want it to show me the stuff already, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. And then Kate tells Jack, she's like, "Oh, I just went to Locke's to figure out if the boat people knew who I was." So that's that plot line wrapped up.
And I mean, that is literally reasonable. Once she says that, it's like, "Oh yeah, I can't really blame you." I mean, I think you could have also asked Charlotte, I guess, but I guess she wasn't back yet.
Yeah, one, she wasn't back yet, and two, I mean, it was pretty easy. It was honestly pretty easy to just get out of Miles, because Miles is planning to portray them anyways. He doesn't care about. It did work.
That was a reasonable motive behind your actions, and I wouldn't stop trusting her for that or anything. And honestly, the difference between Sawyer and Jack is that you can actually tell Jack that was what you were trying to do, whereas you don't even want to tell Sawyer.
So then Juliet goes to confront Daniel and Charlotte and sees them, messing with the chemicals and everything. And Daniel says, no, I'm trying to make it inert so that it can't be used.
Daniel studied physics. I think math too. Maybe he's mainly a physics guy. I've studied physics. I studied math. I don't know shit about chemistry, and I'm not much of a programmer, but I'm not going to call it a plot hole that he can do this, because you know what? He's way smarter than me.
Eloise was like, "Hey, you should take a chemistry class to figure this shit." Except she would do it in a more cold and British way.
If you do not take this chemistry class, I will disown you.
I won't love you.
Anyway, he's...
So then Charlotte and Juliet fight.
Just have the fight.
Juliet
wins, and Charlotte is like, "Do you really believe that Ben wouldn't use this to kill everyone here?" And
she's like, "Yeah, Ben does suck.
Yeah.
So I will let you do what you have to do."
Yep. So then Jack and Kate get there. Juliet's like, "You know what? They are on our side." And Kate is still kind of pissed about that whole hitting her thing, so she wants to be shown what they did. And Jack is just going to wait outside.
And then, Juliet says, there's going to be, this war, and she says, and Ben's going to win, and that, Ben is so super possessive of her that she's worried what Ben will do to Jack, so of course Jack just kisses her because he doesn't give a fuck.
With the flashbacks in mind, I think this was an effective episode because, I know, it just feels like, how do I say this? sometimes, and this is not just a Lost thing, this is like a storytelling in general thing, especially with TV shows based around seasons. Sometimes they didn't know what to do with the character, so they give them some new arc that just doesn't even feel like it is part of their development from before. And I think sometimes Lost has struggled with that. I mean, with stuff like Season 3 flashback, sometimes they just don't know what to do with the character, and what they do doesn't necessarily feel cohesive with what there was before. But I think this feels like a really cohesive step to take with Juliet, in that, like, she's, like, yeah, her whole arc was about, showing that she could escape from Ben and the others, and now she's kind of struggling with, will she able to stay free from them? And meanwhile, the flashback shows, like, here's like an example of how Ben is so difficult to deal with and so manipulative. And I think...
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, she thinks she is broken free, only for this therapist to come up and be like, oh, hey, Ben, the guy you thought was trapped in a basement. I mean, she doesn't know she's trapped in a basement, but whatever. who was trapped in a basement. Yeah, he's still giving orders and is in control. Yeah. So she's like...
I think this is a shockingly good Juliet character episode where, I mean, I know where she ends up during Season 5, she kind of doesn't have to...
Yeah, I was going to say, it even made me root for Jack and Juliet, even though I'm like, I know it's not going to work out.
And it's like, and I know Season 5... Well, like, Jack and Juliet, like, I know they're not the romance, and I like Juliet and Sawyer together, but don't get it wrong. They're like, just great as friends. They're just great as a duo.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like, I know by Season 5... She stops having to give a shit about Ben, especially when he's like 10 years old and she could kick his ass if she wanted. But like right now, I'm just interested in seeing, how her arc progresses and how she gets past him.
What's really funny is that in the flashback for this episode, the therapist says, "Oh, of course Ben is, taken with you because you look just like her." And I think at the time it was supposed to be like that she looks like his childhood friend, even though she absolutely does not, because the childhood friend was like a redhead and everything. Yeah. And what a lot of people, now that once the Season 5 stuff happened, they're like, oh, what if like he like subconsciously remembers like this like, nice blonde doctor helping him when he was shot and everything. Like what if it's like that? And it's like, honestly, that's a better reason.
And like that's creepy, but Ben is creepy.
Yeah. So then at Locke's camp, everyone is suspicious as fuck because they see Ben moving into a house.
Yeah, he's like, he's like, see you guys at dinner. You gotta like I keep saying, Ben won me over as a villain with his whole like, just because he was so deliberately friendly, knowing it would annoy them about how he said, "I'll see you at dinner." Like he is loving it.
So then back on the boat, we see Lapidus getting ready for another flight. And he sees that girl, Regina, reading a book upside down, so that's not good.
I wanted to mention a part of this. He's walking down the hallway, and he says hi to her, and she's shocked. He's like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to spook you." I mention this because every time a show ever does a scene like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to spook you," it's from the other perspective. It's from the one who gets spooked, so the show could do a little jump scare, and then it's like, "Oh, it's just a friend." And I just find it funny that this, like, "I didn't mean to scare you" is from the other perspective where you actually do see him walking up casually and she just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. So then, Saeed's being like, "Oh yeah, since you left the door open for us and everything," and he's like, I didn't do that, like...
And, he mentions, like you don't want to talk to the captain, and I definitely went into the later captain scene thinking, like, okay, I don't believe anything he's saying.
Yeah, so we have Sun worried that no one's returned, and Jin's like, well, let's ignore that, and let's just pick up baby names instead.
And they say they're going to pick a name once they're off the island, so where the hell is she in Season 5?
Well, I mean, Jin does say he wants to name the baby Ji Yeon, so that's the name he picks.
I guess. I keep hiccuping. So she wakes him up when Jack and Kate are back, and Sun just kind of starts to get concerned, and Kate does mention, like, oh, Juliet lies about things, and I think that's kind of, that's where we begin here. And meanwhile, Desmond wakes up, and he notices a note that was slid under the door, and I thought the note would be telling them, like, hey, we have to meet, though I wasn't sure why he would want to meet, but instead it was just, don't trust the captain.
Yeah. So then Sun confronts Daniel about the rescue, and he's like, "Well, it's not our primary objective."
She's like, "Is it happening or is it not?" And he says, "It's not his call."
Yeah, and then we can see Jin has better English at this point, so
yep.
That's good.
Sun's a better teacher than Sawyer.
Yeah, and then the Sun's like, "Hey, we're gonna go join Locke because this is all too sus."
At the start of this episode, I was like really excited because Sun doesn't get a lot of plot lines, and a lot of her plot lines are just driven by romance or motherhood. And it's just great to see a Sun plot line where she is the active one, And this is still a good plot line, but at this point I was like, oh no, why do you want to go to Locke?
Yeah. So then Juliet catches her preparing to go, and tries to be like, hey, you have to leave because pregnant women will die on this island, so you have to go. But Sun's like, you know what? I don't believe
Sun
you.
is anti-doctor. Sun did her own research. And then Kate gives them directions on where to go, but she's like, I do have to tell Jack. But Juliet still doesn't want to let it happen, and I get that because Juliet is a doctor. She has the moral obligation, and she knows that Sun will die if she doesn't do this. And so she...
first she tries appealing to Jin, being like, your wife will die if you leave. And Jin's like, I'll just follow Sun. And then she's like, hey, gotta pull out the trump card.
And, and it's like, I do think that Sun should realize Juliet... I get that if you don't trust her, but what motive would Juliet have to be this obsessive about making you not leave if it wasn't to save your life? But then, Juliet just, gives that reveal. And it's like, on one hand, it's really not your place to say it. But, it's saving a life. Would you reveal something like that if it was to save a life?
If it was to save a life...
Yeah. What can...
Probably.
What can you
do?
If
I had exhausted all the other options, then yes.
It's like, that's definitely not going to get Sun to be friends with you.
No, but I think it could show the severity of the situation.
Yeah.
Sun slaps her.
It reminds me, you got me to watch The Good Place recently, and they talk a lot about moral dilemmas, and, this is one of those.
Yeah, I think this is a case of, what do you call it, utilitarianism. Yeah. You're doing something bad, but for the ultimate end goal of more good happening.
Yeah.
So then, Jin is obviously upset and leaves.
Sun tries to beg, and meanwhile Bernard is like, hey, what, are you going fishing? Can I come? And then he's like, wait, what's happening? But Jin wants him to come because, honestly, Jin and Bernard are bros.
Yeah, and, he talked to Jin about, being the married guys on the island and being like, oh, the island's special, cured rose, and saying that going with Locke is wrong because Locke's a murderer.
Yeah. You can't forget that, he literally is. I almost feel like I've been forgetting that too easily, that is a very valid reason to stay away from him.
Yeah, and not even in a Jack way where it was like, oh, it was self-defense and then we were having to do...
He literally just...
No, he threw a knife in the back of an unarmed woman who was trying to help them. Yeah. So then, Saeed and Desmond, they start hearing pipe banging noises coming from somewhere.
I almost thought that this was Michael giving a message in Morse code. That would have been stupid.
I think it was supposed to be some kind of weird message, but they didn't go through with it.
Anyway.
And then we have a scene where Regina kills herself.
Yeah, that is fucked up.
Yeah. And actually, in the background of the scene, you actually can see Michael, skulking around trying to hide his face from Saeed and Desmond.
Yeah. And then, no one really sees it happening, and so they're kind of late on stopping her, and then by the time anything is happening, it's too late, and the captain says to stop. And I think he is right about that, because she had chains on her, and she was already far gone.
Yeah. And so the captain says that they're dealing with, some extreme cabin fever going on, and says, once the engines are fixed, then They'll move to safer waters.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, I don't suppose you'll tell us who hired you. And it's like, oh, yeah, I will. It's Widmore. Let's do.
You know him. You know him.
Okay.
And he shows them...
I mean, he's supposedly famous. So.
And I thought he knew about Desmond. It felt to me like he implied that.
Desmond knows 100%.
Well, it felt to me like the captain was implying that like he knew Desmond was with Penny.
Oh, I didn't
honestly,
even think about that.
Now I need to rewatch the scene because I thought a line of dialogue felt like it was implying that, but I don't remember which now, so we should check.
Well, it might have been and I just missed it.
Well, we should check, yeah. But I mean, it wouldn't be... I don't think it's that crazy if that's the case, just like the captain would be in on the situation.
Yeah, so then the captain starts talking about how amazing the scale of the whole plane crashing is,
like,
and he thinks that Ben did it.
Your boss did it! And it's like...
Yeah.
And it's like... Okay, Michael said don't trust the captain, but also don't trust Michael, so maybe... So now I'm not... At first I was thinking, yeah, don't trust the captain, I bet he's just bullshitting, he knows his boss did it, but... Now maybe Michael is the one trying to mess with them and the captain actually doesn't know his boss did it.
Yeah, to be fair, it seems like the kind of thing Widmore would say, like, oh, hey, you know that whole plane crashing and getting 324 dead bodies in there? Yeah, Ben did that.
Yeah, and,
couldn't be me.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, he would probably say everything was Ben. Like, I mean, you know, go to Michael and say, hey, come on, Ben did that. He could go... Alright, I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway...
Anyway, so then, you know, Juliet tells Sun that, you know, she did what was for the best.
Yeah.
And...
Yeah, and...
You know, then Jin comes back
also,
and says he understands what happened.
Well, first, I just want to say, this is a plot line where, as it's happening, I'm like, thinking, like, come on, just say this. And then it ends with, like, the characters actually saying that, so it's really satisfying. Like, everything I was thinking about, like, Sun is her patient. She has to save her life. Juliet ends up saying that here, and that was very satisfying.
Yeah. And, of course, you know, he asks if he's the father, to which, you know, he is, which is nice.
And I like how they did not redo the arc of them being apart. Instead, they showed their relationship is stronger now because Jin is capable of forgiving her. And I do love him, you know, he acknowledges the man he used to be.
Yeah. And then we get the stinger for this episode, which is Sun and Desmond. They get a real room, and they meet Kevin Johnson.
Right before this happens, there's like 2 minutes left in the episode, and I'm just like, give me the Michael reveal. I need it. Don't make me wait even longer. But, yeah, they you know, the doctor calls over the Michael, or Kevin. They're building up the tension, and, you know, we hear his voice, so you can already tell. Then he shows up, and they just stare into each other's faces, saying it all without saying a word. Because Michael is like, yeah, it's me. Are you going to say something or what? And they're like, I guess we're not saying anything yet.
Yeah, you know, I just love Saeed, like, with the absolute death stare.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Kevin. Like...
You know what this made me think about? I obviously knew this was coming because I saw the whole flashback of why he was there. But at the same time, like, this must have been insane when it came out. But you know what it made me think about? I feel like these days, this kind of reveal always gets ruined by leaks. It's always like...
Oh, no, this was revealed by leaks.
Okay, so it was too.
Well, not even by leaks. It was that in the credits of the show, suddenly, starting at episode 1 of season 4, suddenly Michael's actor is now listed as a main character again. He's the spy.
I was thinking, like, you know, I feel like, because it's not necessarily that there weren't leaks back then, because there have always been leaks. But I was just thinking, right now, I definitely, like, if I was watching this as it came out and it was coming out right now, I would definitely have seen, like, oh, here's some here's some photos of the set where we see this cast member is back, like, long before the episodes came out. And I was thinking, like, this kind of thing, it shouldn't get leaked like that. You should be careful.
It's not a leak. Is it a leak if it comes from the show itself?
They shouldn't have shown that. They should have made it be a surprise.
Yeah. It's the things they will try to make a surprise are always the the season finale like stinger scenes. Like they always they title the scene something instead of titling it, you know, what you usually title scenes of, you know, Sun and Jin reconnect, or, you know, Saeed and Desmond meet Michael. They'll title it like the season 1 one where Walt gets taken off the raft. They just titled that scene "The Bagel," and once we get to the season 4 stinger, I will. They were super smart with season 4 and what they did with that.
All right, well,
which is funny.
That excites me. I mean, overall, these episodes, more good stuff. I was engaged by the plot. It moved pretty fast. A lot of cool stuff happened. It is just in an exciting place right now.
Yeah, it's gonna even just zoom by super fast because next time we'll be covering episode 77, December 26th to the 28th, and episode 78, December 29th to the 30th.
We are getting very close to New Year's Eve, and I know things go down there. Wow.
We're so close. We are so close. But I hope you join us next time.